Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Fulham podcast. This is your home of all things Fulham, and today we continue our build-up to the game on the weekend. It's the final opportunity for Southampton and Fulham to grab 3 points before Christmas. And as promised, today is our crossover episode. So it's my pleasure to introduce not one but two Saints fans from the Daily Southampton team. We have Greg and we have Zach. Guys, it's been a bit of a turbulent week. Not a lot to shout about this season. How are you guys holding up?
Yeah, it's been a weird one. Like, I know that none of us really expected us to sort of jump out and, well, apart from Greg, who predicted us to finish 12th. Most of us had very realistic sort of expectations of coming out and maybe being able to stay up from a relegation dogfight. I don't think anybody thought we'd have 5 points after so long. And obviously, the decision was finally taken probably slightly too late to get rid of Russell Martin on Sunday. And although it was slightly too late, by the sounds of it, the board also seems surprised that they made that decision, and there is absolutely no plan in place, and everything's a bit chaotic. But after last night, the fact that we saw, whether it was catharticism or sort of being unshackled from the system, whatever you want to call it, we played a lot better, and it was quite nice to see us not try and have 70% of the ball, but do nothing with it. It was all right. I feel like, how do you feel about it, Greg? You were very much sort of as positive as me last night.
Yeah, I'm still feeling it. It's a strange one where we're in this sort of weird limbo state where there's not even like a clear-cut picture of where we're going next. Like, the odds on the next managers just seems to be changing by the hour, and they up and down. But it's kind of like a weird calm before the storm, right? Like, we're gonna do something and move forward, but until that point the pressure's sort of off, and it's kind of nice, I think, for the players. And like they showed that yesterday by playing a lot freely, and putting a performance that we were happy enough with. I mean, it's a tough sort of congested period for fixtures coming up now anyway, so I don't know if that piles the pressure on or not, to be honest. It's just sort of a strange. Do you know, it's that weird feeling that you get after Christmas where you don't know what day it is or where you are? It's like that, but just in football terms and a couple of weeks early.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree there. And Zach, you mentioned it there, whether it might be too late. Are you both of the feeling that this should have happened earlier, the change of management and the 9 points adrift now? For someone to come in now, it is a tall order. 10 points, I guess you could make that with goal difference. Realistically, do you think this should have happened weeks ago?
I understand why they kept him, because there was kind of an almost exception at that point that we're probably going to go down. And I think they've kind of always thought that we were going to go down. And they were quite happy to have Russell Martin in place. And I think that they maybe took advantage of fans not being as disruptive until we lost to Chelsea, which was so bad that since then his position became untenable. I reckon if that noise hadn't happened, had we not been defeated so bad on such a weird occasion, I think he'd still be in charge, because they seem to have that was where they'd like made their bed, they were going to lie in it. So I think on our opinions of whether or not he should have gone earlier, probably. Do I think that decision was ever going to really happen? No. Am I glad it's happened now? Yes, but only because it's got so toxic. And in some of the replacements we're looking at, we wanted to get rid of a manager because he was a championship quality manager, and like two of the leading favourites are championship managers, and Nathan Jones. So it's a weird one. Like, I think that it was the right decision overall, and I know that we've been a bit ambiguous about it because, quite honestly, we haven't known how to feel about it, because we've had games where we've played well and maybe we could have done all right, but it does kind of feel after yesterday, whether, whatever the reason, we played so much better and the squad looked so much happier. So if it was true that he'd sort of lost part of the dressing room, whether that be only in a footballing sense as opposed to personal wise, then at that point, it was the right decision. So if it had happened earlier, maybe we'd have a couple more points on the board, but also we'd have a couple more points on the board if the referees didn't, screw us over a couple of times. I don't think it would make a difference whether we stay up or not, mind you. Don't know if you feel
I'll
the
come
same,
to
Greg.
you first on this, Greg, and Zach, you can chime in as well. What ultimately do you think were the shortcomings of Russell Martin, why he didn't succeed? And did you sort of worry that this would unfold with the style of football that he implemented, taking it from the Championship in towards the Premier League? Maybe there was a bit of stubbornness and lack of want to change, flexibility.
Yeah, there was definitely some stubbornness, and I think probably some arrogance in there as well. It was exactly that. It was a strict want to stick to Plan A and the expectation that Plan A was going to work eventually, and it just never did. And then, towards the end of his time with us, he a beautiful soundbite where he's like, "Well, Plan B just needs to look really similar to Plan A," and I just don't think you actually understand what a Plan B is. And yeah, it was sticking too much to his guns when we just needed, the system that he wants to implement is going to work if you've got good enough players, and that's fine. But there are flaws to it, and you just need to be just a little bit more dynamic. No one's expecting like a complete difference for us to suddenly become like a hoofball team or anything like that. But just to change it up a little bit and have a bit of variety in the game instead of just making the same mistakes again and again and again.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I will point out that in our Room 101 episode, Greg, that you wanted to put Pep Guardiola into Room 101.
Yeah.
And that is partly why.
Yeah,
I don't 100%. Think it's going to be quite a Vincent Kompany style. He's going to go and get a job at Bayern Munich. But I do think that every team trying to play like a team that has now lost in 10 games in a row or whatever it is wasn't really the best thing for football in general. And yeah, I just think ultimately his own stubbornness killed him, but it doesn't mean that we can't enjoy that we ended up at Wembley. But realistically, if we were that good, we wouldn't have had to have gone to Wembley to come back up, would we?
Yeah.
As far as replacements go, I think it's quite interesting what you guys touched on. So the names that have been linked, managers in the Championship at the moment, like Carlos Corberán at West Brom and Danny Röhl at Sheffield Wednesday, who's done a good job because I remember him taking over when they were struggling, looking at possibly getting relegated to League One. He steadied the ship there. Then they're now in the top half of the table. But what do you think is the board's plan, the direction they're looking to go in? Are they looking to break the bank on a more glamour name, higher profile name to give them a chance, as hard as it is, to stay in the Premier League? Or do they almost accept that this season they are going to go down and the plan is to rebuild, go straight back up, and then get back to where they have been for so many years, which was an established Premier League team?
I think that's what they want. However, I don't think that has been their priority, and that has been evident through their footballing decisions. And, arguably they're going to have in 3 seasons potentially 2 relegations under their belt since they took charge. A lot of the ownership have done a lot of work around the stadium, improving facilities. We've got a new pub that opened up the same day that Russell Martin got fired inside the stadium. They are looking with Southampton City Council to expand an entertainment zone around St Mary's. There is a lot of economic investment in areas that are very important to the business side, and it's almost like they've completely forgotten the football side. And the fact that when they fired him, they have not had a direct replacement or successor lined up, and they haven't even really been looking, I think speaks volumes to how they are going to approach going forward, because I think they have written off the idea that we're going to stay up, but I do think that they know that they have to they had to get someone else in, and now it will probably be whoever is most willing to deal with the situation at hand, because when January rolls around, we're probably going to lose some players. And we currently, unless some of the scouting targets were outside of Russell Martin's domain, don't have any players we want to bring in. I don't know how you feel about it, Greg, but I know you have similar thoughts on our ownership and what they do for the club, and especially the footballing side of things.
Yeah, it's baffling, isn't it? Like, how can you run a business and not, again, have a plan B? It feels like exactly the same problem. Like, even wanting to stick with and trust Russell Martin through to the end of the season as an accepted decision, you'd still want to have a plan B, at least an idea of who you would want to approach in case, if he'd gone on a 10-game unbeaten run and then left to go and be Real Madrid's next manager because the style was that impressive, like, we'd have been in the same situation. And obviously the way it's gone was always more likely, but just to not even have a short list is a bit baffling.
And this, just one final question with regards to the manager's situation. Obviously, we don't know at this stage who's going to come in. It might be someone from left field. I know you mentioned David Moyes as well, someone's experienced hand. He's been in charge of teams that have been in relegation fights and succeeded, as well as also managing more successful clubs higher up in the table. But what do you think is the one most important thing that the new manager has to come in and has to address with the group of players that he has at his disposal?
I think the first quick win would be to sort the captaincy situation. Like, we're in a position where our captain, Jack Stevens, has been suspended for 43% of the season, which is just ridiculous. I feel like just addressing that instantly is a quick win to get everyone on side. And then it's just play with something, put some fight in, and job one is just get more points than Derby did, right? That's got to be it. That's the first target, and we go from there.
That is a horrible bar. Yeah, I would agree. I think personally that their first job is going to be to get through the January transfer window, to try and keep as many of the players that we care about, shift as many of the players that don't care about the club, and potentially start scoring more, getting us into positions where we can score more. That already happened yesterday, significantly more. The confidence of the team is that they were able to drive it forward, but there is still a almost panicked situation when we're in an opposition box. When an opponent is in our box, there is an absolute stunning fear of, oh my goodness, it's going to go in. But genuinely, we could have 11 men in the opposition box with only 2 defenders, and somehow they'll still manage to kind of sky high it. So I think that's an incredibly important part, is just finding a way to win, whether it doesn't matter how, is I think one of the most important things. But the personnel is also going to be more impactful than people realise, because with some of our star players like Kyle Walker-Peters, his contract expires the end of the year. I very much doubt they're going to want to let him go for nothing. January's rolling around shortly. He'll probably be out the door then, if I'm totally honest. Or, the real hope is he signs another 5-year contract. That's not happening.
Interesting. So, we've spoken in length there about the manager's situation. In part 2, we will come on to some of the personnel, the players at Southampton. But before then, just a few words about our sponsors. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. I want to talk to you about a young player that's making a bit of a name for himself. He's already attracted the lure of some of the bigger teams in the league. Tyler Diblin, is the hype real surrounding him?
Yes and no. He's an absolutely fantastic player for us. He's come through the academy. He rejected Chelsea to come back and play with us. There are certainly elements of his game that he can improve on. Greg discussed quite a few of them yesterday in our sort of post-match review of things that he felt he should have done a little bit better. But considering that he had barely played a game for us before and has kind of sort of swung out straight into the first team and is now one of the first names on the team sheet, is fantastic. And there's a lot of transfer hype building around it, and potentially I'm kind of glad that there's so much of a focus on him. There's some other sort of players, and Greg knows exactly who I'm talking about, where the focus isn't on, because if we lost him, it wouldn't be the end of the world. And he's a young player, he's got a whole career ahead of him, and the focus seems to be so much on him that maybe we could keep some of the others that that are flying a little bit under the radar. But I think whenever you have sort of a young, like, English player come through and do what he's done in such a short amount of time, you are always going to have that sort of level of interest and luckily, one of the people with an interest is Man United, so he can easily bolt on an extra 50 million. Yeah. So even if he does go, hopefully we'll get a lot of money for him.
Fascinating player, and he's so clearly a raw talent that's there. And yeah, we touched a bit last night about some of the parts of his game that aren't quite there yet, but they are getting better. But just his willingness to drive forward with the ball and take players on without fear is his biggest asset, and the rest will inevitably fall into place. But yeah, with him rejecting Chelsea, the hope is that he is a player with the attitude that he prefers to be this sort of slightly bigger fish in a slightly smaller pond, rather than one of these players that's going to sort of gets dropped into a big team and just become another one, a number without anything sort of special about him. But yeah, that, and we really needs to start wearing shin pads properly. Just
it seems to be the fashion now, isn't it? With Jack Grealish, is obviously he started the trend with his smaller shin pads. But just for people who haven't seen so much of Tyler Diblin, what would you say are his greatest qualities? And are there any players, maybe past Southampton or current players in the Premier League or world football, that you would compare him to?
It's an easy comparison for me because the ball sticks to his feet like glue. The ability to dribble the ball is his key strength, and it's like reminds me of a prime Adam Lallana. He has the same sort of control over the ball, where once he has that ball at his feet, he has full control of where it's going. Sometimes it's beautiful to watch.
I would say currently just his generaling sort of football desire, like he wasn't phased by the jump, and there's a lot of players who take a couple of years to adjust, and we've got players that come from foreign leagues and take quite a long time to adjust to the Premier League. He got put into a game and just jumped at the opportunity, and it doesn't seem to have phased him. And if he can keep that sort of level of demeanour throughout his career and that level of sense of calm, I think it will be nothing but great for him and great for whoever he's plying his trade with in years to come, because you don't really get that a lot nowadays. A lot of players can buy into their own hype. I'm sure there's definitely going to be some level of, if I was seeing compilation videos of me going up, I would probably get a little bit arrogant about it. But yeah, it's just the fact that, the jump seems to have completely unfazed him. And that's the worry from our Southampton perspective, is like, if he was to jump into a Champions League team and suddenly play in front of Real Madrid, I don't think it would faze him either. And yeah, I think that's really impressive, because, I'm in my 30s, stuff still terrifies me. The idea that he sort of jumped out, played in front of Manchester United and didn't really bat an eyelid, it's just very, very impressive.
And of course, Southampton have got great history as far as young players have got coming through their academy, like Gareth Bale, Theo Walcott, Luke Shaw, Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. You definitely see him following in their footsteps at some point. Obviously, you guys are hoping it's going to be with Southampton. But, I mean, if you do go down, do you see him staying?
The awkward part of the question. It's the awkward question that we have to start thinking about, because I think as I'm more the pessimistic side of the podcast, Greg is far more the optimist. Again, predicted finish of 12th, just let that sink in. And I'm very aware that we will probably lose quite a lot of talents, and the fact that he's already rejected a big club before, admittedly that was sort of in the youth, and one of the reasons being is because of the fact that he just didn't really like it at Chelsea. So it might be that he gets on somewhere else. He will always have a big place in our squad, right? And you've seen what happens to a lot of ex-Southampton players. Some have gone on to be an Adam Lallana or a Virgil van Dijk. But for every Virgil van Dijk and Adam Lallana, you've got a Danny Ings, or most recently, James Ward-Prowse, who, after years of being our captain, free kick specialist, extremely well loved at the club, went to West Ham, and a year later is on loan at Nottingham Forest. And I think he's probably having an all right season there. Like, it's not like Forest are doing bad, but also the fact that it's always a risk. You don't know how it's going to turn out. But I think that if the prospect of Premier League football is dangled in front of him, then I think he will go for it. It just depends whether or not it's regular, because I think the difference being with us is that it will probably always be regular. So it's always going to be, it's always a fear we'll lose our players. But being a Southampton fan, that is part of the fun. It's just at least we can usually get a big pile of money for him, i.e. Romeo Lavia.
I'm going to counter that, and I think that the future of Tyler Diblin is that in 2035 he'll be retiring as a one-club man with Southampton with the all-time Premier League goal-scoring record.
See, so there's a fine line between optimism and deluded. Greg likes to stand on that.
That's an exclusive, guys. When you come back in 11 years and Tyler Diblin's gone on to break Alan Shearer's record,
you heard it here first.
You heard it first. On a bit more positive note, not talking about players leaving, someone who's actually made their England debut score for England is Taylor Harwood-Bellis. I guess the Southampton community must be extremely proud of that.
Yeah, very much so. And he's, I think, when we talk about players potentially coming and going, he's someone in my mind who I see as a future Saints captain, regardless of where we are. He really seems to enjoy being at the club and playing for the badge, and it's good to see him go on to success. He's in the international team. He sort of struggled a bit at the start of the season to find his footing with the step up to the Premier League, but I think has done a really good job since then of proving himself as a real talent at this level.
Agreed. I think he found his home with us, and just with Burnley the season before, was going to probably want to be one of the journeymen of City. So I think that him being able to find a home, like obviously part of what was so great about that playoff final win for him is because of our promotion to the Premier League, it made his transfer confirmed, and I think that you could see how excited he was to realise that he was part of the club. And for being a fan of Southampton, we're so used to people, even saying in press conferences that they're really excited to play, especially in the years gone by, the Premier League, not play for the club. He seems to really, really care, and and you can see that he's hurt when we lose, and there are some players that you can genuinely tell aren't interested. So for him to get his England debut and do what he did in front of his father-in-law as well, and his father-in-law's team, was very, very funny. And I think we're all really glad to have him here. And there have been games where he's not played his best, like a lot of players this season, but I think he's a delight to have at the club personally.
Yeah, and he's always the first of all of the players over to the fans. Win, lose, draw, good performance, bad performance. He's there, showing his full range of emotion. It's open to see, and clearly puts his all in every single game. Yeah,
definitely. Before we round things off, look at some key battles on the pitch, give our score predictions, I just want to give a shout out to GSPN. The Global Sports Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcast. With dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, fantasy football, and a daily Premier League wrap-up broadcast in 5 different languages, it's your one-stop shop for your daily football fix. Find GSPN wherever you find your usual podcasts. Well, guys, I am going to give you some calls for encouragement for Southampton possibly getting a result on the weekend. First of all, you're playing away from home, and we know what you've been like in the last 2 home games, shipping 5 goals against Chelsea and Spurs. Well, shipping 5 goals and a half against Spurs. But Fulham, they do come into this game actually 1 defeat and 8, so they are playing well. Last 4 games, they've come unscathed against top teams, Arsenal, Liverpool, Brighton and Spurs. But there is a but. The last game they played against a team in this sort of position, a team that hadn't won away from home all season, was Wolves. And they lost that game 4-1. And another cause for encouragement, they've taken the lead in 13 games this season and they've only won 6. So there you have it. I've painted a picture for Southampton fans to gloss over and relish the prospect of going to Craven Cottage on Sunday and getting a result. What do you think is realistic? Can they get a result?
It's going to be really hard for us to preview it because, we didn't really know how it was going to go Wednesday because we have absolutely no idea what the team sheet was going to be. The team sheet ended up being very similar to a lot of our team sheets so far this season, but the style of football was, the same but also very, very different. I think we could be up for it, though. I think that the players, have a point to prove to whoever's coming in at this point. And I think that, although we played against a heavily rotated Liverpool, we scored yesterday. We looked like we were going to score right up into the end. And I think, we could at least give it a good go. Obviously, the last time we played Fulham beat us, but then also Mitrovic was playing for Fulham at that point. So it's been a hot minute. So yeah, I personally think that I could see us winning, and that's Greg knows that's going to be optimistic from me, and I would say something exciting like 3-2. That's where I'm at. I think we're going to do. I think we're going to do it, Greg. I think we're finally going to get a win, maybe. And then we'll see if my predictions end up going completely down the toilet, and then I never predict a win again.
I think you're right. I think there's a chance that we have more to prove in this game. I guess the hope is that Fulham almost look past us to the rest of a very busy football period, and with our little bit more urgency and a little bit more fight, that comes good. I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as 3-2, but maybe sneak a 1-0 win. I'll take that. I mean, I'll take anything.
And Zach, sorry, you spoke about it there. You weren't sure going into the midweek Carabao Cup game what side was going to be selected given the situation they're in with the interim manager. Are you expecting any changes from that game coming into this one?
Probably. There was definitely some players that came on as subs that staked their claim to potentially start at the weekend. The only thing that I would say is that still seems to be a misunderstanding as to who's going to be in charge. I think they're doing a lot of interviews tomorrow, so I very much doubt that someone will be in charge Sunday, but also stranger things have happened in football. So if we have someone different, I think it will probably end up being similar, just because apparently the players had some sort of say with the interim manager as to who was going up and who was going to play, and I think it will probably be a similar situation. I imagine that's why we had so many substitutions, because everyone wanted to get their sort of chance to shine. But I can't imagine it being hugely rotated. Adam Armstrong might come back in after suspension. I don't know who you think will come in, Greg, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I don't know. We might see Walker Peters back, if that was a knock. I'd still want to see Onachu and Archer played together. So I'm hopeful that that's something we'll see. But I don't know. Downs went off with a knock and didn't really set the world alight. But midfield is an area that we're particularly light in. So I don't know. I don't know if there'll be anyone to bring in place of him, to be honest. So
it really depends on injuries as well and stuff, right? Because obviously Bree went off with a little bit of a niggle as well, so we might end up with Sugawara at right back if Kyle isn't available. So yeah, I think that would be the only thing that really changes stuff up. I was really hoping Lallana would start as well, just because he acts as a sort of leader on the field, almost a captain, if you will. And I think with Downs going out, maybe we put a few more forward-centric midfielders in place, especially with the way that we've started to play now. Again, nothing drastically different, but when I tell you that every single goal kick that went up, despite the fact that most of them immediately landed into the feet of a Liverpool player, got a round of applause, that was definitely a thing that happened.
Yeah, I guess the other key change as well is we were hopeful that Ramsdale will be back between the sticks.
Yeah. Can I just ask you, I mean, you mentioned it briefly there, his name, Adam Armstrong. From the outside, he looks like one of these strikers that every time he's in the Championship, he rips it up, scores a lot of goals. But when he gets the opportunity in the Premier League, can't seem to translate that form. It seems a level too high for him. Is that a fair criticism, a fair observation, or do you feel like under a different manager, he can go on a goal-scoring spurt in this division?
I think that's exactly right. I think that's exactly what we've seen from him. I was hopeful that it was a case that we hadn't seen embedded into a team previously in the Premier League, but yeah, he really has struggled again this year. Still think that he probably has a part to play for us, but for me, I see that more as sort of a rotational role and sort of some fresh legs off the bench. I'd much prefer Archer in that position to Armstrong. I don't know about you, Zach.
I'm in agreement. As I said, I think I could see him coming back in just because he's been one of the sort of primary players in recent times and is one of the more vocal ones after the manager went. And the only reason I think he wasn't involved yesterday, realistically, was because of the suspension. But yeah, I'm in agreement. You've hit the nail on the head, really. He's taken another step up. We hoped it would take a little bit of time. And then he's, scored 2 or 3 goals, one of which being a penalty, one of which being off the back of a penalty. But in comparison to sort of, as much as Cameron Archer hasn't had a lot of chances so far this season, he's scored 3 goals, which is the most for our for our strikers at this point. So, but yeah, I just think that he considering he was the top scorer last season for the Championship, and then sort of kind of petered out this season, and it'll be interesting to see what comes January. I think he'll probably be one of the ones to stick around, but yeah, I don't see him being the focal point of the team as much as he was in the Championship.
And just finally, I just want to get your final thoughts on this Fulham team. What do you think the strengths of the team are, and what do you think the weaknesses are, if there are any, that Southampton might be able to exploit?
It's a difficult one, right? It's almost like, so you've got like Smith Rowe and sort of what I would consider to be, you've taken a lot of players, sort of what I would consider to be like B-teamy players from the top, but have managed to do something fantastic with them. And, ultimately we can come into this game going, oh, it's Fulham, but you're sitting 8th. And I think that you have a good chance to punish us if you do. And it's one of those, I'll hold my hands up. And when I was younger, Fulham were one of the clubs that you sort of were just didn't really enter my radar much. But you have gone on, similar to sort of Wolves, although that's like chalk and cheese at the moment, to establish yourself as a Premier League side, building something over time. I just think that that's where we can get damaged from anywhere at the moment. It's really hard for us to answer the question, because every single time we're asked, it's like, where can you see us conceding? Who do you think will have the opportunity? And the problem is that Jadon Sancho scored against us at Chelsea, and we didn't even realise Jadon Sancho was still in English football. So the answer is, where can we be hurt? Well, if we decide to kick the ball directly to you, any of your outfield players.
Yeah, if you've got any strikers who are in a poor run of form and haven't scored in sort of 20 to 30 games, then this is probably their opportunity to shine. We seem to be the team that breaks those streaks frequently.
Maybe that'd be a message to Marco Silva. Bring Carlos Vinicius back into the fold, who hasn't kicked the ball in about a year. He might score in this particular game. So
that's what happened. That's definitely a thing. I kid you not. Every time we are always breaking records. None of them are as positive Southampton records, put it that way.
Yeah. So Zach, you're going for 3-2 Southampton, and Greg, you're going for 1-0. Right. I'm gonna predict Fulham to win 2-0. I'm not predicting anything crazy like 4s and 5s and 6s, given Southampton's debacle in the last couple of games. I feel that the players probably will have a bit more motivation, knowing a new manager is coming in around the corner. It gives an opportunity to possibly fringe players to stake their claim, get into that first team, get into that starting 11 when that manager does come in. But I think Fulham at home, I think they will have learnt lessons from that Wolves game. It was a wake-up call, a bit of a reality check, and the subsequent results for them have been really good. And we've seen on their day they can be a match for any team in this division. So as long as they're not complacent, play to their levels, then I think they will come out the victors on this occasion. Any final thoughts heading into this one then, guys?
Yeah, the thing is that you have players like Iwobi and Jimenez and people like that who, as again, have come from other clubs that... I swear, is Jimenez, Greg, one of the ones that always scores against us? Because it's like Tottenham. When we play against Spurs, we always know that Son is going to score. And there are many, many players that, like, when we play against them, it's one of those ones that, is he going to score against us? And I know that it might have been back in the day when he was more of a Wolves player, but he is one name that I always remember racking up goals against us. So, yeah, as much as my optimistic 3-2 is here, I could also see 2-0 as very, very realistic.
Yeah. My closing thought is that actually, from a more neutral perspective, it's nice to see Fulham doing so well this year, and I hope it continues, Sunday excluded, and continue to have a successful season. It'd be nice to see them go onward and upward and maybe challenge for one of those European spots.
Here. And on that note, that'll draw things to a close for this special crossover episode with the Daily Southampton team. Be sure to check out Greg and Zach on the Daily Southampton podcast. That'll do it for today. We'll catch you on the next one.
Every club, every day. The global Global Sports Podcast Network.